Focus is actually a mini apps that we build to help you to boost your productivity with your friends. So if you click on create a new timer, and then you'll see a timer here, so you can start, and then you can reset as well. Okay, you can reset. Now, let me stop it first. Now, if I give this URL to you, right? I give this unique URL to you here. Okay, you can also open this URL in a separate page, so it will look like this. You can also open it in a separate page. Yeah, all right. You can click on the icons here, and then you will see the number jumping. All right, you can see the number jumping on my screen as well. You can see the number jumping on your screen. So if you go back to here, also you can see, right? Yeah. So what I'm going to demo to you is how you can take this code and use it as a template to build something like this. Okay. So from a technical standpoint, it covers a lot of interesting and fun stuff. First of all, it covers HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, of course. Yeah, this is a very modern web design, and you can realize that the speed is very fast because, again, we are using Jamstack. The front end is designed this way, and then the back end, the heart shape or the clicking stuff, is not triggering any page refresh. Right, I'm not doing any page refresh, but you can see the numbers right in front of our eyes. Yeah. Okay. Enough. Thanks for the claps. All right. So without further ado, let's look at the code. Yeah. This is what we call wait, let me change to a bright theme so that you can see clearer. Usually I use black theme to protect my eyes. Yeah. Okay. I think this is easier for you to see right now. Yeah. So if you look at the left-hand side, this is called the files panel. Under the files panel, we have a couple of folders. Some of them you should touch, some of them you shouldn't touch. Those that assets folder is the one that for us to keep our CSS files, to keep our README file. And then the component level is the one that we use to keep our component. Later, I'll explain to you what is component. And then layout file, you don't have to touch it for now. We have configured it already. Middleware, you shouldn't touch it as well. Yeah, this directory is not required. You can delete it if it's not there. So every single folder that comes with a README file, you can easily see that layouts, middleware, those are not necessary. Pages, it is required. Yeah, pages directory is required, and plugins and static, yeah, these are optional. Okay. And this one, there's the store also. Yeah, this is the store for us to store data. If you have any data or dynamic data that you want to store, you can use that folder. Now later on, right after this webinar, when you want to build your own, you just have to click on this button called fork. Okay, fork is like a photo state. Basically, when you want to fork a project, you just click it, and then you create a version in your own sandbox. And these are some of the configuration file. Remember, I talked about Nuxt.js. This is the one that we are using. Nuxt.js is actually based on this application, this CSS. Sorry, this JavaScript framework called Vue.js. What am I doing? Okay, Nuxt.js is actually based on Vue.js, and then we have package.json, which is a configuration file for our project, and then you have tailwind config as well. These are configuration file. Dependencies, all these you don't have to touch it because it's already configured for us. So here we go. Now, whenever you start a project like this, right, the first thing that you look for, always web development project, okay, yeah, always look for something called index. So in this case, our first page is index.view. Inside index is for us to design our homepage. Okay, now if you look at our index.view, right, there are a few components. Okay, and I'll make this one smaller so that you can see clearer. There are a few different sections inside a view file, right? Inside a component file, there's the very first part is always the template section. So you can see that we have a template here, right? And then the second part is the script. So template section defines the display, the look and feel. Then the script section defines the actions, define the properties, define the logic. Okay, script sections handle the coding, it handles the logic, and then sometimes we do have style section. Style section help us to deploy, determine the colors, the font size. So if I were to split them up, this is the HTML part, this is this JavaScript part, and this is the CSS part. Okay, and we combine them together into a view file, and this is usually what we call a component. And a component can embed a sub-component, which is what we're going to see in the next page. But let me give you a brief introduction. Okay, first of all, we define a container. Inside container, we define a div, a division, and then inside there we import this thing called logo. Okay, later I'll show you where I write logo. H1, H2, these are headings. Button is this one, right? We call it button green. So I have a green color button here. Of course, if you want to change it later on, you don't like green, you say I want to use blue. Sure, no problem. Okay, but you have to refresh the page. And then we have div. So this is again another division. So division here, we put the text here. So focus is a timer based on Pomodoro techniques, increases your productivity, allow your friends to monitor your progress and support. And then it appears here. And you can realize that this is, what do you call it? The responsive apps, right? So meaning that whenever you resize it, your content actually move together depending on the size of the screen, and this is what we call responsive. And then I have another division down here that talks about our footer, brought to you by Lead, with text color. Okay, so these are some basic things. So you realize that these are the common HTML tag, except there's one called logo, right? So where do I get the logo from? Logo is actually from here. Import logo from underscore components logo.view. So I go back to components logo.view. Let's click inside. This is nothing but I just draw a tomato here. So I set it to div, and then the font size is 150 pixels, and yeah, that's all. So save it. So then we will have this thing called create a new timer. So when you click on this button, right, called create a new timer, it will trigger an action called create timer. So create timer is actually a method that I define at the bottom. So this is a create timer method. So I have a console log says that create new timer. So when you go to a console, it's actually, it will say somewhere here. Haven't clicked. Later on when I click, it will shows you create a new timer. And then once we have done that, right, it will go to Firebase, get a reference called timer, and then I want to set the initial values. So there's 0 claps, 0 heart, 0 bottle, and 0 run. And then console log say new timer created, redirecting, and then we go to the next page. So if you have no questions, then I'll click create new timer. Okay, then you see it flashed a little bit. It's for me to debug basically. It's still there. Create new timer created, redirecting, and then we load a new page here. Okay, so this is a new page. Now when we load this page, right, this is a page with an ID. So we have created another page called ID. Now the reason why it is underscore ID, not just ID.view, right? Because this number, this value is dynamic. It's not static. So whenever you want to put a dynamic value, you want to put a value that is like a parameter, right? You have to put underscore in front of the file name. That's the only difference. And the good part of using Nuxt.js is you can just build the pages, and then the path will be generated for you automatically. So you can create any page that you want and follow the same way of a view file. You can use my files as a template, as an example, right? So you can use it as template. You can use it for HTML. You can use it for CSS, and then you can use it for JavaScript. So this page is very straightforward. I have a title here called focus. So this is focus. H2 is extra. I can remove it. Sorry. And then after that, this is the part where we create another timer, right? This is the timer. And timer is actually another component that I have created. So the good part of using a component is that it can make your page very clean. Yeah. So then you can also reuse the component. For example, later on, if you want to go to another page and still use the timer feature, right? Then you can just call timer with the ID. And where did I get the ID? The ID is from the parameters of our route, meaning that I take this ID as an ID for my timer. And where do I get the details of the timer? I go to components and then I look at the timer.view. So I go to the components, timer.view. Okay. So this is the actual template of my timer, and let's look at them one by one. First of all, div class equals to super time left pretty. All right, let me explain to you. Time left is actually a variable that we use it to keep time. So, for example, right, usually when we use this Pomodoro technique or this tomato technique, we have 25 minutes. So 25 minutes is equivalent to 1005 seconds. Now when we write a timer in JavaScript, right, it doesn't automatically help us to put it into format like 2500. So it becomes a bit ugly if I count down from 1005 seconds, right? It's not professional. So what I move on to do is I write a formatting function. So whenever you put this vertical line and then you put a function name behind, right? This is called a function that's used to be applied on this value. So we go to pretty as a function. It must be here somewhere. Okay, so this is our filter, right? We write a filter called pretty, and the input is time. So what should we do? We take the time, divide by 60, we get the minutes, and then we take this time, divide by 60, whatever is remain, we use it as seconds. Okay, this is how we format. And then we return a string called minutes plus colon equals to seconds dot to string pet start 20. Pet start 20 is to make sure that there's always two digits there. If there's any missing digit, it shows a 0. So let's say if I remove this part, yeah, the 0 is missing. Okay. And then when it comes to single digit, then it will look very odd, very ugly. So we don't want that. So that's what pet start 20 for. Okay. And then once I input it again, yeah, the 0 is back. Okay. So this is JavaScript. Everything inside the script section is JavaScript, and then style is CSS. And then after that, I have two buttons here, right? So first button is for me to start and stop the timer. So the second button is for me to reset the timer. Now to start and stop the timer, we'll need this method called toggle timer, meaning that when you click, when it start, it becomes stop. When it stop, you click, it becomes start. So this is toggling. This is toggling the toggle the timer. And then this is reset timer. Reset timer, very straightforward. Okay, basically we just want to make the timer goes back to 25. And if you can see that, right, these are two buttons, and then I use some of the CSS to configure it. So very easy to understand. This one background blue 500, and then when you hover, it becomes darker color 700. So you can see that 500, 700, 500, 700, 500, 700. Okay, so this is the how do you call it, the effects when you toggle the button. And then you have text white, white color text, and then font bold, and px is padding, yeah, x-axis padding, y-axis padding, and then rounded, yeah, it's a rounded corner button. And then the same styles applied to uh, the reset button, except this time around we change the color from blue to red. Okay, so again, when we have the actions that we want to execute, right? When we want to have a JavaScript trigger, we need to go to the script section. So this time we wrote two sections. One is called two methods. One is called toggle timer. The other one is reset timer. Reset timer very easy. We just set the time back to 1005 and then console log reset timer. Okay, now reset timer. You see that time is reset. I can let it run again and then reset. Okay, this is reset timer. Now toggle timer is similar, but what we need to do is we have to check if this dot time interval, meaning that if the time interval is running, right, then we want to clear it. Yeah, we basically want to clear it. Time interval is the so-called the internal clock lah. When the clock is ticking, and then when I click stop, right, it should clear the clock. And then this dot time else, okay, if there is no time interval, meaning that the clock is not running, right, then we need to initialize it with a clock. So set interval, this dot time left minus equals to 1. Minus equals to 1, meaning that every time, every seconds that it takes, the 1005 become 1499, it has to go down by 1. Yeah. And documents dot cookie equals to time left. This one you can remove it. This one is to set the cookie. Yeah, if you don't want to, you can remove this line. And one thing that yeah, we were testing this afternoon, right, and they were telling me that yeah, I did not write the logic to capture it when it's become 0. Yeah, so that's something that you have to take note. Because I haven't written the effect part, like show you a buzzer or show you some celebration, for example. So this is the time interval, and how long you want this to run? 1000. So this is millisecond. 1000 millisecond means 1 second. Okay. So these are the two methods: toggle timer and reset timer. WK Cork asks, can you repeat what is this view id.view file for? Okay, if you look at all the pages, right, they don't have an underscore ID. Yeah. So ID file is for us to create a new clock. So every time when we have a new timer, we will need to have this ID generated. So this is the ID file. And because the ID is dynamic, like your product code, your SKU, everything is dynamic, so you have to put an underscore in front of it. Yeah. And this is basically the timer status. So stop and start. Yeah, just to configure this. And then we have the social elements here, right? So not only I want to be able to write a timer, right? There are tons of timer tutorial out there on the internet. But what about I want my friends to be able to see that and also show me the support? Okay, so I have created 4 counter buttons here. Now this is the time where you see that if you have done some programming before, right, you need to rewrite the same code 4 times. Yeah, if you've learned HTML before, you have to rewrite the same code 4 times. But now you don't have to, because we are using Vue.js, we're using components, right? I can just create this button as a component and configure their values only, like the text, all right, and the field, and also their counter value. Okay, so here I create a span class for me to type the string, show your support, and then I have 4 counter buttons here: clap, heart, champagne, and running. So I configure their text and also their correspondent value here. Okay. And I guess this is pretty much it, and have configured the size super the 200 pixel. So we have configured our timer properly already, right? Our timer is done. So what we need to do next is we need to go and configure individual button. Yeah, individual button. So there should be another component that we want to import called counter button. So we go to counter button. Counter button, the design is very straightforward. Basically, we are designing 4 buttons like this. So these are the CSS style lah, yeah? Rounded lah, shadow lah, text color lah, border lah, background. So I love Tailwind CSS because it's very easy to understand, very easy to configure, and you can visualize the result straight away. And then when we click on mouse down, whenever we click, right, we want to be able to see that the count is added. Yeah, we want to be able to see the count is added. And then we display the text, and also we display the counter. So text is the symbol. Yeah, this is the text, and counter is the zero part there. So this part we don't have any data, so we don't have to worry about it. The data is actually coming from Firebase. So when when it's loaded, right? Okay, when it's loaded, we load the parent's ID, and then we go and get their counter. And every time when the button is clicked, yeah, when the button is clicked, we will have this value called new count equals to this dot counter plus one. So your current counter plus one. And then we configure a dictionary for us to update the field. And then we write these values to Firebase. Okay, so when you combine all this together, this is what you see. This is what you see. I believe I covered all of the files, right? Yeah. Index, ID, yeah.